Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Crime Beat, Episode 2, Washington, D.C., by A.C. Fuller, narrated by Emily Sutton-Smith. Chapter 1, Wednesday. Through the din of punk music that filled the crowded bar, Jane Cole struggled to hear the TV news anchor stumble over the breaking news. Former Vice President Alvin Myers has been murdered. We're hearing... I've just been told... She waved down the bartender. Can you turn up the television? A man reached from a nearby table and slid onto the stool next to her. He pointed at the screen. Holy hell! Myers got shot. Turn it up. The bartender turned off the music, and the sudden quiet drew more attention. Dozens of eyes locked on the TV above her. As the bartender turned up the volume, Cole relaxed, no longer needing to fight so hard to pick up the anchor's words. The newscaster brought his finger to his ear. I'm hearing that. My apologies. All we can confirm at this time is that former Vice President Alvin Myers has been killed. After this quick break, we'll be back with more on this stunning news story. Next to Cole, Robert Warren sipped his coffee, eyes on the TV. She faced him. Right now, every news producer in the world is trying to decide whether to air videos of a former vice president being murdered. That poor anchor has a half-dozen people arguing in his ear. He's doing a decent job, given the circumstances. She dropped her eyes to her phone. The shooting wasn't trending on Twitter yet, but it would be soon. Her feed was cluttered with various versions of, OMG, Alvin Myers is dead, and who bothers to assassinate an ex-VP? One tweet stood out, a wobbly cell phone video claiming to show the moments just before he died. Posted by someone at the event, the video showed the crowded rooftop of the Watergate. On the left, two bartenders in black and white poured wine behind a curved wooden bar. Waiters shifted in and out of the shot, setting glasses on trays, then disappearing from the frame. Between the bar and the railings that separated the rooftop from the sky, 40 to 50 people chatted in small groups, sipping drinks. Some stood by the railings, staring in the direction of the apartment buildings and hotels that loomed across the Potomac. Looks like a typical D.C. cocktail party, Cole said. You know what it was for? I saw something on the scroll about a fundraiser for a world literacy program, something like that. Alvin Myers was one of the more involved former vice presidents, boards of directors, international foundations, that kind of stuff. Why didn't he run for president? Cole shot him a look. Really? What? I don't follow politics. There are a few videos of him being a little handsy with female interns. Nothing too bad, but enough to get him burned alive by the Democratic base. I thought getting handsy was a requirement for being president these days, Warren said. Myers made millions as a private citizen. That could also be why he didn't run. Cole held the phone between them as the Twitter video made a quick, disorienting pan to the right, as though the person holding the phone had been bumped or turned quickly. The shot was now centered on a glass door where Alvin Myers entered, flanked by two men in black suits. The one on the left muttered into the sleeve of his jacket, Secret Service. Myers was blandly handsome, tall, with silver-white hair and a constant smile that was probably necessary in his line of work, but struck her as phony. For the next 30 seconds, the video followed Myers as he shook hands, slapped backs, and repeated different versions of the catchphrase he'd used for years. What's good for the world is good for America. Then, in an instant, Myers' hand shot to his neck like he'd been stung by an invisible hornet. He dropped out of the frame. People screamed. A Secret Service agent pointed at the railing. The other agent crouched, also disappearing from the frame. The video jerked and showed only a blur of backs and flailing arms. A shriek pierced the scene. A woman shouted, "Myers is down!" "It came from over there," a man called. The video jerked again, a shot of heads and sky, then ended. Cole scrolled for a few seconds, looking for information or other videos, then glanced at Warren. No footage of Myers after he was hit, and no footage of where the shot came from, at least not yet. Right away, Secret Service would have had Myers in the elevator, then in the back of his armored vehicle racing away from the scene. Protocol, even if they knew he was dead. Warren pressed his hands to his cheeks and let out a long breath of air. His pressure release valve. If he was the president, they'd have had bags of his blood in the limo. Not that it matters if the shot was on target. Warren nodded at the TV. The broadcast was back from commercial, and the anchor had recovered his composure. Initial reports from the scene, and please keep in mind that these are unconfirmed reports, but initial reports from the scene indicate that the shot may not have come from someone on the rooftop. Perhaps a neighboring building, we're being told. The anchor paused, focusing on the voice of the producer in his ear. For those just joining us in breaking news, former Vice President Alvin Myers was shot and killed this evening, and we will be here all night with special coverage of his death and his legacy. Stay with us. First thing that pops to mind, Cole said. How does Alvin Myers connect to Raj Ambani? I don't know much about him. Moderate Democrat, 4-term senator, 2-term governor of Virginia before being picked for VP. And he cashed in when he left office? Yep. $150,000 per speech, 7-figure book deal, the works. So he's well off and powerful. 2 things he had in common with Ambani. But what do they have to do with each other? Cole did a quick search on her phone. She clicked the first link. I thought so, she said, holding it up to Warren. Ambani hosted a fundraiser for Myers and has donated money to him. Warren was skeptical. Don't businessmen like Ambani donate to all the candidates, Republican and Democrat, just to make sure? We need to start somewhere, and that's a connection. Warren gave a short nod. Why not start in D.C.? She stared at him blankly. I have a car. His meaning hit her suddenly. You serious, Rob? He nodded. Cole scrolled through Twitter as she considered. She'd quit her job on a whim less than 6 hours ago. She hadn't given it much thought, but now she was hoping for some freelance work to tide her over while she looked for something permanent. And if the Myers killing was connected to the Ambani murder, this was about to become the biggest story in the world. She was about to ask Warren what kind of car he had when a text arrived from Joey Mazzolano, a scumbag lieutenant from the 5th Precinct, but also one of her best sources. The Italian Stallion. Buy me a drink tonight. Antonio's at 10. She considered ignoring him, but tapped out a quick reply. Jane Cole. Why? The Italian Stallion. You said you always pay your debts, and that rag tip was shit. Jane Cole. The rag tip was spot on. The Italian Stallion. He died before I could get any credit, and you could have called me when you found the apartment. Plus, I have something for you. Cole let out an exasperated sigh and went back to Twitter. Her eye landed on another video from the roof of the Watergate, which showed a different angle on the scene. She held it up for Warren to watch with her. While the video played, she considered Warren's offer again. Until recently, she'd believed he was an abusive cop who should be fired and prosecuted. The dashcam footage had shown that he'd been provoked in the worst way possible. She didn't think she would have been able to keep her cool if a pedophile rapist had made that kind of comment in her presence. But still, she felt uneasy about hopping in his car for the 4-hour drive to D.C. The new video didn't have a clear shot of Myers, just people drinking casually before the shooting and screaming in panic afterwards. When it ended, Warren plucked the phone from her hand and laid it face down on the bar. He waited until she met his dark eyes. Cole, he said, right now I've got nothing else in my life. Nothing but this case. You don't have this case. You're not a cop anymore. In America, you need a special license to drive a taxi, need to pass the bar exam to practice law. Hell, you need a permit to serve hot dogs at the fair. Cops have to pass mental and physical tests, written exams. But you don't need anything except a laptop to be a journalist. She didn't know what he was driving at, but she wasn't up for another fight about cops and journalists. It's called the First Amendment. That's what I'm saying. I want to get to the bottom of this. I bet you do too. We can sit here all night watching the news and looking at blurry clips online, and my guess is there will be more and more blurry clips like this. But you and I are the only two people alive who know about the guns, about Chandler Price and the screenshots. If Myers is connected, we have a better chance of figuring out how than anyone. Let's go to D.C. and do what we both do best. His face was pleading, earnest. She recognized that look. It was the one thing they had in common, that indefinable, relentless need to learn the truth. If they could, it would be the biggest story of her life. She nodded at the bartender. "Can we settle up, please?" "So we're going?" "We're going, but I need to make a quick stop on the way out of town. Gotta meet a source." "Who?" Cole exhaled sharply and pressed her hand across her forehead. "You okay?" Warren asked. Cole sent a quick text, agreeing to meet with Mazzolano, then said, "Pick me up outside Antonio's in Little Italy in an hour." Chapter 2. Antonio's was an old-school Italian restaurant in the English basement of a brownstone just off Mulberry Street. She'd met Mazzolano there 5 years ago, and since learned that it was the last of a dying breed of restaurants, family-owned, with the same menu for nearly 70 years. The night they'd met, he'd called it real red sauce Italian, none of that frou-frou northern garbage. Every time she went to Antonio's, it was half empty. The owners seemed to go out of their way not to publicize its existence. Restaurants with few customers were sometimes used as money-laundering operations for owners with other sources of income, and Mazzolano had hinted at those other sources of income, but he'd never come out and named them. Cole descended the 5 stairs down from street level and peeled off her coat as she entered the dimly lit restaurant. A handful of people looked up from dark wood tables, lit by large candles that flickered dark gold light across their faces. Mazzolano stood behind the bar, helping himself to a glass of grappa, a grape-based brandy she loathed. He waved her over and she sat on a stool, setting her bag on the one next to her. She hoped the move would discourage Mazzolano from sitting within arm's reach. She flashed the snarky smile she knew he loved. "You work here now?" "Antonio is back in the kitchen. He lets me help myself. You know, time was you could find similar joints all over Little Italy. Now it's mostly tourist spots, $16 for a bowl of weeds." She smiled politely as he poured her a glass of grappa. She'd heard his spiel before. Mazzolano shuffled around the bar and moved her purse, then flopped down right next to her. A wet smile dripped from his face. Cole pretended to be unfazed. "And what do you provide him in exchange for his hospitality?" He wiped sweat from his forehead with a white handkerchief and pressed it into his nose, inhaling deeply. "I can always tell what I drank last night from the way my sweat smells the next day. You ever notice that?" "Gross, and no. I only drink tequila, so I imagine it's the same every day." She pushed the grappa away. "It's impolite to refuse a drink from a friend." "If I drink, will you get to the point? I have somewhere to be, and you said this was important." He smiled. "Would I lie to you?" "Yes, but I'll take my chances." She shot the grappa. The liquor seared her throat and cleared her sinuses all at once. "There. Done." The empty glass clacked loudly as she placed it back on the bar. "By the way, what happened with a hair sample from Ambani's killer?" Mazzolano mumbled something inaudible, then said, "You hear about Myers? Of course you did. You're a news junkie, always on your phone." Fundamentally, Mazzolano was a bully, so instead of lying, he often just changed the subject when he got a question he didn't like. But it was odd that he didn't want to discuss the DNA test. Normally, he'd have taken the question as an opportunity to brag about his clout within the lab. "Saw it on the news," Cole said. "Hearing anything?" A second high-profile murder in a week, sniper style? Got me thinking. Thinking what? He waved her off with a grunt, as though he'd decided to change the subject. He was drunker than usual, which was dangerous, but also useful. Useful because the drunker he got, the more he talked. Dangerous because the booze hypercharged his piggish behavior. Not relevant anymore. Is it? His voice was biting, sarcastic, a tone he usually concealed under a facade of pseudo-charm. The hair sample, you mean? Rag is dead. He really fucked me, you know. I showed you the video, you gave me the hair sample, but before I had time to do anything with it, you find Rag and he's dead. No glory for the Italian stallion. I'm sorry about that, but I held up my end of the bargain. You were my first and only call when I was attacked. There was no way I could have predicted how that went. It's not nothing, the hair. Once you get the results back, it'll at least help fill out the file. Mazzolano looked away. You did submit the hair, right? His cheeks, already red, flushed. Sure I did. A drop of sweat dripped onto the bar. He dabbed it with a napkin, spilling his drink in the process. She studied him as he walked around the bar to pour himself another shot. People often sweat when they're nervous or lying, but sweat alone isn't a tell. You have to establish a baseline during normal conversation. Booze made Mazzolano red and sweaty, even under normal circumstances, but tonight something was different. The one thing she liked about him was that he'd always told her the truth. He wanted to be liked, wanted to come across as important so deeply that he'd never tried to spin her. Not this time. He was lying. She was sure of it. Chapter 3. Warren arrived early in his '69 Ford Cougar and took a spot across the street from Antonio's. He'd purchased the car for $2,000 the week he got back from Afghanistan and spent a year and another $12,000 whipping it into shape. Everything had been restored to its original splendor, except the radio, which he'd updated to an MP3-compatible system. His drinking and temper had cost him his family, and now his job. Blue Lightning, as he called his beloved car, was the only thing he'd had through it all. He had a few minutes to kill and needed to hear a friendly voice, so he called Gabriela Rojas. Gabby, it's War Dog. I assume you've heard? That you're out, or are gonna be. I heard. Sorry, man. I'm not gonna ask you to try to intervene, but I couldn't get it done. Way above my pay grade. She'd been promoted from beat cop to sergeant, and from sergeant to detective in near record time. Since then, she'd been assigned to the elite Joint Terrorism Task Force, so she often had intel none of Warren's other friends in the department had. What are you hearing? She sighed. I don't know for sure, but I think he goes high up. Judge assigned to the pedo case, the guy you roughed up, has clout, that's all I know. But why would a judge want to see me gone for roughing up a... He didn't finish the question. If a judge wanted him fired for roughing up a suspect, especially this suspect, it could only mean one thing. Yeah, Gabby said, as though reading his mind. Actually, I was gonna call you. Rumors on this judge are bad. I mean, bad. Has a history of going easy on sex offenders. Positions himself to get the cases on his docket. I hear he's already under investigation, but for whatever reason, he has clout with the right people at IAB. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying back away. Quietly. If this judge is what I think he is, he's gonna get caught. But not by you. I'll do what I can. Warren rolled down his window and leaned out. The thought of a judge protecting pedophiles made his blood boil, and the cool air calmed him. Okay, he said softly. I'll back off. But if the judge is what you're saying, promise you'll get the word out. I'll try, but you gotta do something for me. There was silence on the line before she continued. What happened with Reg? You know no one buys the whole Superman story that you just happened to hear a woman screaming from below and badassed your way up the fire escape. And it just happened to be the reporter who broke the story about you? We were looking into the Ambani thing together. I had a couple hunches that turned out to be right. War Dog, come on. I don't want to say too much, all right? You don't trust me? He grunted. You might be the only person in law enforcement I do trust, but you still got a job. You don't want any piece of what I'm getting involved in. Involved? Present tense. It's still happening? A young couple emerged from the restaurant and shared a vape pen on the sidewalk. He was impatient for Cole to show up, but he did trust Gabby, and he had time to kill. You hear about Myers? Yeah, but I asked about Rag Ambani. He let her statement hang in the air. There's a connection? Warren let out a long sigh. I can trust you, right? Gabby's voice was hushed. I swear on St. Gabriel. Warren didn't know who that was, but Gabriella had said it once soon after they'd met. 3 officers had been ambushed and killed execution-style, 1 precinct over in Brooklyn on his 2nd day in training. The department was shaken. Warren was shaken. She'd sworn to St. Gabriel the killers would be brought to justice. And they had been. For the next few minutes, he talked her through the day he'd seen the post about the gun purchase on the dark web, how he'd connected with Cole, and their investigation into the townhouse that led them to Margaret and Chandler Price, then to Rag. I don't suppose you can get me anything on Myers, he concluded. She laughed. The FBI and the Secret Service aren't famous for sharing their cases. You can't play the JTTF card? A terrorist connection? No. Rag, then. Can you help me with Rag? She ignored the question. You've been a busy beaver, haven't you? Still can't believe you partnered with a reporter. I just can't see it. Neither could he. Gabby, can you help me? I should say no, and not to flatter you, you're one of the only people in law enforcement I trust, too. I'm no longer in law enforcement, remember? You're not a cop anymore. Doesn't mean you can't enforce some laws. It wasn't like her to say that, but she seemed to be agreeing to help him. Michael Rag. He doesn't have any other addresses in the public record, already looked. But maybe he's got a registration with the state or an old address through the DMV. Can you check? I'll let you know. Chapter 4. She wasn't sure why Mazzolano lied, but she wanted to draw him out. Can I get the DNA results when you do get them? She asked casually. He lumbered around the bar and sat back down. What for? Just to be sure, you know. He held a knife to my back. I know it's the same guy, but it'd be nice to have the DNA back me up. He waved a dismissive hand. Sure, but you know how backed up the labs are. Could be weeks, months. Still, I'd appreciate it. Shit, Mazzolano, why'd you drag me here? First, let's talk about Michael Rag. How'd you find him, anyway? Reporting. Come on, Jane, give Daddy some sugar. He leaned in close and continued in a heavy whisper. What kind of reporting? She walked behind the bar and poured 2 more shots of grappa. The first shot had warmed her just enough to allow her to tolerate this goon. Despite her better judgment, she wanted another. Still behind the bar, she said, I looked into the townhouse where the shooting took place. Maggie Price? Yes, but no. Chandler Price. Cole nodded slowly, then shot the grappa. Mazzolano stood and threw back the shot, slamming the glass down, then dropping into his stool. He was sloshed. Well, I'll be damned. He shook his head slowly. You sure? Cole nodded. You're the only person I've told. It wasn't something I had solidly enough to write. My editor doesn't even know.
Why not?
The way I got the information was, well, she shrugged. But anyway, it led to Rag. I still don't know exactly what Price did, but he told his wife to be out of town the day Ambani was killed. He set it up so Rag could shoot Ambani from the roof of a vacant townhouse. I don't know where Price leads, or if you can get to him, but promise me if you do, you'll let me break the story. He rested his wide arms on the bar.
Thought you were out of a job.
News travels fast. How'd you hear?
He smacked his lips. You're not the only person I know at the Sun.
I'll be freelancing for a bit. Promise me, though, you find Price, you give me a heads up.
I will.
So what was the tip you dangled to get my ass to Little Italy? If you haven't heard, a former VP just got shot. I'm eager to get back to the news.
Speaking of your ass.
More quickly than she thought he could move, Mazzolano heaved his heavy body around the bar and stood next to her, too close for comfort. She leaned away, but the other side of the bar was blocked by a tall table covered in menus. His massive body pressed her into the table, which scraped along the floor. "Get off me," she said it firmly, just loud enough to cause a couple at a nearby table to look up. He squeezed her arms tightly. Something thick and wet touched her ear. His tongue. He let out a low moan.
I told you I had a tip for you.
He grunted, breathing heavily. In a boozy whisper, he continued.
You know you want this as bad as I do.
She lifted a leg and brought her heel down violently on the top of his foot. He grunted in pain and let go, then cackled with laughter, stumbling backwards. Dropping to her knees, she slid under the table at the end of the bar and hurried out of the restaurant. She spotted Warren in the driver's side of a dark blue muscle car across the street. She darted through a gap in the traffic, looking back as Mazzolano staggered through the door. She slid into the passenger seat. "Drive." Warren glanced toward Mazzolano. "Drive," she said again. Chapter 5. As the Ford Cougar pulled away, Mazzolano inhaled deeply. He still smelled her perfume. When he'd licked her ear, it had rubbed off on his upper lip. Roses, he thought, mixed with some spice. The Cougar turned right at the end of the block. On his cell phone, Mazzolano dialed Officer William Bowman, who picked up on the first ring.
"Stallion, what's up?"
"WB, I need you to tail someone."
"You still at the end of the block?"
"Like you said to be."
"She's in a muscle car, heading south on Mulberry, likely to turn on Canal. Couldn't get the plates, but it's dark blue, late 60s or early 70s. She's in the passenger seat. Driver was a black male."
"What do you want me to do?"
"Just tail them for now. I'll be around.
I want to know where they stop and when, right away. And if you can get an ID on the guy she's with." "I'll try." He inhaled again, then stumbled back into Antonio's. Chapter 6. They were waiting to pay the toll at the Holland Tunnel when a police siren broke the silence. Cole looked out the angled back window, but saw no flashing lights. Warren reached for his phone, and Cole exhaled. The siren was his ringtone. "Why the hell would you make that your ringtone?"
"It's a specialty ringtone and text alert I assigned to only one person. And—"
He trailed off, eyes on his phone. "What?" He handed her the phone, and Cole read the text. It was from Gabby, no last name, and it was an address in Nutley, New Jersey. "What's this?" Warren fumbled in his pocket for cash.
"I asked her to help us with Rag."
"Who's her?"
"Old friend, like I said."
The wailing siren announced another text. Cole read it aloud as Warren paid the toll. Text says, "Address is ship, store, and more." Came up in an address search for Rag. His business, apparently. Nutley is about 20 miles north. D.C. is south.
Worth the detour? Ask if police have been there yet. She might not know, but on it.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?